Welcome back. The Global Elders Initiative takes its 10 members from a variety of nationalities and backgrounds. Each has their own experience to bring to the table. Since Jimmy Carter left the White House in 1981, he's written more than 20 books and has acted as an elections observer, once in controversial Palestinian elections which saw Hamas come to power in 2006, and then later that same year in elections in Nicaragua. Another, Mary Robinson, headed the United Nations High Commission for Refugees between 1997 and 2002. She began her career as a human rights lawyer and campaigner before becoming the first woman president of Ireland. Mandela, the eldest of them all, at 89, is today one of the most recognisable faces in global diplomacy. Just 5 years ago, he was chief negotiator between Burundi's warring factions. Altogether, the group covers Europe, Africa, the Far East, the Americas and the Indian subcontinent. And together they seem to cover the issues with collective expertise in human rights, religion, government, finance, civil society and diplomacy. Well, joining us again are our guests. From London, Martin Bell, he's an ambassador for UNICEF and also a former BBC war correspondent. Also in London, Abdul Wahab Al-Afandi, a senior research fellow for the study of democracy at the University of Westminster in London. And in Damascus, Mohamed Dango, South African ambassador to Syria and Lebanon. If I could just come back to you again, Ambassador, you obviously have worked with Mandela and you know the region. You're in a region that you described as a tinderbox. Can his experience in the past be applied to something like the area that you're in now?
Yeah, I think what we must also do is, when I said earlier, it would be the legacy of Mandela, not Mandela himself, probably. If we take his health into account, I think the legacy of Mandela collectively with the people involved that can actually play a role in an area such as I'm describing at this point in time. But if we take the legacy of Mandela together with that of Tutu in South Africa, and the experiences we learned from that, was that reconciliation was the most important issue. That what the world can learn from that South African experience is that reconciliation was up front, that truth was a matter that was very important, that people had to confess in order to in fact get amnesty, and that justice was an important matter. But the important issue was reconciliation, and in this area, particularly in the Middle East, the question of reconciliation is very important, because at times I believe that people, and I think it's also got to do with the legacy of Gandhi, that people in this area believe in an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth until the whole world is toothless and blind.
Okay. On that note, let me bring in Abdul Wahab Al-Afandi. That idea of peace and reconciliation, do you think there are issues like the Middle East, the Palestinian question, for instance, that which presumably will be top of their agenda, that they could actually bring some new thinking and dynamism to?
Well, I think reconciliation, yes, is a point, but the strength of a commission like this is its ability to speak for the weak, because a strong moral authority of these personalities can be deployed in favor of voicing the grievances of the weak to the powerful. That's the only way they can do it. But you spoke about the personalities in this committee. I remember I was in Atlanta when President Jimmy Carter formed his committee in 1992, and he actually graciously, I had a meeting with him, and he consulted me about this. He said, I have assembled this list, what do you think? And I looked at the list and I said to him, 90% of the conflict you are looking at, the committee, I must add, had a limited purpose of dealing with resolving conflict. It's not like this one with a wider remit. And I said, 90% of the conflicts you are looking at are in the Muslim world, and you haven't got a single person from the Muslim world in that commission. Now, he put me on the spot and he said, who do you recommend? And I was, of course, checkmated, but I think the name of Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Yamani probably came to mind. But the issue here also, this commission, having got also a single person from the Arab world, where, as you said, a lot of the conflict are there. Does this mean that we don't have any person of moral authority in the Arab world? Maybe that's true. But I think the issue is, in the end, it should be a voice for the voiceless to the powerful. That's the only thing it can do.
Martin Bell, do you think the makeup of the panel is as good as it could be?
There are always going to be questions about why was this person in and why wasn't that person in. I mean, the qualifications are various, the records are entirely different. Some are former heads of state and government and others are not. And probably people will be wondering why there isn't, why the Arab voice isn't going to be heard there. The question of reconciliation and facing yourself is obviously important, and I think that for many countries the South African experience is both an example and an inspiration, and therefore I don't see the Commission as being unbalanced in having two leading South Africans on it.
And in fact, we mentioned Jimmy Carter just a moment ago. He has apparently said that they'll be in a unique position to be able to be free to talk to the pariahs that other people can't talk to. How important, in your experience, you've covered a number of conflicts, how important is it for someone to be out there talking to the people that no one else really wants to talk to?
Absolutely vital. From my own reporting experience, I always made a beeline so far as I could for the pariahs, the outcasts, the groups and nations and parts of a nation who were held responsible for this or that conflict, because unless they can be approached and understood, there's never going to be a resolution. So I think that's a very encouraging beginning. You're absolutely right. You start with the pariahs, you can make some progress.
If I could bring you back in, Ambassador, one thing is, though, in that region, let's talk again about former President Carter. He has the book that he published recently had very mixed reactions. Could that mean that people then would sort of think, well, this panel has got particular people on it, they've got particular views, and therefore we're not going to listen to what they say?
I think what we're busy with here is sometimes is not a clash of civilizations, but rather a clash of definitions. And what some of the powerful nations and powerful individuals in the world want to define, they will define as either terrorism, and it's unique how occupation has become terrorism, or resistance to occupation has become terrorism. But if you're trying to persuade people, you actually have to stand back. And if you're not using megaphone diplomacy and people understand that you are there to try and assist to resolving the problem rather than having an agenda of advancing one or the other parties, it can actually succeed. But the moment you are perceived to be pushing one or the other agendas, it becomes more difficult.
Abdul Wahab Al-Afandi, the question of money, I mean, the funding for this, as far as I can understand it, is reckoned to be estimated around $20 million over the next 3 years. It includes money from people like Richard Branson, Peter Gabriel, the UN Foundation. Does it matter where the money comes from, and do you think they have enough to make a difference?
Well, I think it matters quite a lot, because this committee, in the end, I think it's called Nelson Mandela's committee, but it's Richard Branson's committee. Everybody knows that he was the one who is funding it, who is bringing everything together. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the minimum they can have is power, but we are looking here at moral authority. And moral authority, and they mention independence as a mark of their moral authority. Now, the question of moral authority itself is questionable in this regard, because how do you attain moral authority? Normally, you attain moral authority by not making anybody, by not upsetting anybody, by trying to please everybody, and that's a problem, because if you are controversial, Jimmy Carter, as you mentioned, has written a book. The moment he voiced strong views, he was labeled as controversial. Now, the independence of this commission is important. It is important that they should get funding from areas which they do not taint this independence, and we will have to see that. They should probably tap grassroots financing sources or something like that. Martin
Bell, you mentioned just earlier, and I was intrigued, your comment about your years in politics were shocking. What were you shocked by, and was it to do with sort of moral authority and those kind of issues that are in play here?
Yes, I think so. We've been talking about the ethical foreign policy, which was an ethical dimension in foreign policy, and yet the British government continues to use cluster munitions, for instance, which have the effect of targeting children. I was shocked by the party system. This is all very sort of local politics in Britain. I was shocked, I suppose, most of all by the fact that it seemed such an amoral occupation, as if it was concerned only with national interests. And one reason I welcome this council of elders, this group of elders, is that we've got the world in a state now where the collision of interests is not a sufficient guidance for the adjustment of human affairs. There has to be a moral force. Now, Nelson Mandela, for many years now, has been a one-man moral force. Now you have a group of moral forces. I would like to think that he's going to be even more influential in a group than he was alone, but he's very influential alone, and the world is still, in my view, in a bit of a terrible mess.
OK, I think on that optimistic note, we will leave it there. We're running out of time. But thank you to all our panel of guests. Martin Bell, there in London, UNICEF ambassador, also a former BBC War correspondent. Also in London, Abdul Wahab Al-Afandi, a senior research fellow for the study of democracy at the University of Westminster in London. And from Damascus, Mohamed Dango, South African ambassador to Syria. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for joining us. And thank you for watching this edition of Inside Story. We always welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us, insidestory@aljazeera.net. From all the team, bye for now.